I didn't know much about Time Cut before watching it on Halloween night. All I knew is that it had time travel, it was a slasher, and it had Antonia Gentry from Ginny and Georgia and Madison Bailey from Outer Banks. Both shows I somewhat enjoy. These details, along with the plot being about a girl born in the present, traveling back in time to stop her sister's murder at the hands of a serial killer, I figured this would be a movie I'd like. So I was slightly disappointed that I didn't end up loving this movie as much as I wanted to. Now, I didn't hate the movie, but it could have been a better, like, a lot better. There was a lot of potential for greatness, but the main crime of the movie is that it was not fun. It's not the fun 2000s movie that myself and other people wanted to see. Instead, we get something that I describe as empty, a tad lackluster, and a bit boring. And because no one in my life has seen this movie or will be bothered to watch it, I am now going to talk about it on the internet for the next 10 minutes or so. The main character that we follow in Time Cut is Lucy. We learn that her sister, Summer, was one of the 4 killed by the Sweetly slasher in 2003. The serial killings halted the town in its tracks, never being able to fully recover from the tragedy. Especially since years later, still no one knows who the killer is. Even though it's pretty obvious in the beginning of the movie, but more on that later. Lucy's parents are deeply affected by Summer's murder, to the point where it heavily impacts Lucy's life. They have a constant, sad, depressing aura surrounding them that hasn't gone away. In the first few minutes of the movie, Lucy is accepted into a NASA internship program, which I don't think I have to say is a huge deal. When she finally comes around to telling her parents, I would describe their reaction as apprehensive happiness, but the minute they learn it's outside of town, they begin to shut the idea completely. They try to dissuade her from going because they're scared something bad will happen to her. While I'm sure Lucy is sympathetic to her parents' feelings, I think it's hard for her to reconcile there's this huge familial loss and she doesn't have strong emotions about it because she doesn't know the person. I'm sure she's sad that she didn't know her sister, but it's not a big loss for her because she never knew Summer. I think all of these things comes to a head when Lucy sees how her family was before Summer's death. She realizes she has a different set of parents compared to Summer. In the past, they seem more lighthearted and fun, while in the present, they're just shells of themselves. Then it gets worse when Lucy realizes had it not been for Summer's death, she would have never been born. It's like the ghost of Summer's life haunts hers, making her own life feel meaningless. She's living in the shadow of someone she's never even met. All of these emotions lead to a heartwarming moment towards the end of the movie when they try to capture the killer. Lucy wants to sacrifice her own life to save Summer's, and Summer also wants to sacrifice herself to save Lucy. Now, this part of the movie I think was done extremely well. Personally, I have not seen or read a lot of media where the main character loses a sibling they've never met. It's just a heartbreaking situation for everyone involved, and I wanted to cry for Lucy because it was so sad. And another thing I liked about the movie is that Summer is gay. I loved how she was genuinely bothered when Lucy mentioned she'd end up with a husband, calling it, quote, a fate worse than death. And I feel that's where my positivity ends with this movie because overall, it isn't that fun to watch. I'm not saying it's an agonizingly terrible movie experience. I mean, I was slightly entertained, but I don't know, this movie is missing something. I don't know exactly what it is, so please do not ask me, but something was missing. I just don't think there's a lot of fun moments in the movie, and then the actors didn't really have much to work with in terms of the script to make it more fun. Here's some ideas I have that could have made the movie more fun. Now, these might not make logistical sense with the movie's plot, but let's just be a little delusional for a second and let me have this one. One idea I had, maybe one of the killings should be at a house party. Now, the first kill we saw in the movie was at a barn party, but I feel like having it at a traditional house party with all the shenanigans involved would have fit the 2000s vibe a little bit more. Think of Mean Girls, how Katie is going around the house trying to stop everyone from destroying it. She's catching people making out in her bedroom. That kind of hijinks I think is missing from the movie and would have made it more 2000s-y for me. Lucy and Summer could have went to the mall for Lucy's makeover. It would have made for a better montage going store to store trying on all the clothes instead of just going to Summer's closet in her bedroom. Now granted, Lucy knows 2 of Summer's friends would be killed there later that day. It might not make logistical sense for them to be there, but like I said, just walk with me on this one, okay? And then instead of the Olive Garden being the meeting spot of the movie for some strange reason, make it a pizza place, an arcade, or even a movie theater. I think all those places were popular in 2003. And can I just say, in both the present and the past timelines, the Olive Garden looks so dull. It's lacking the cozy, warm vibe it has in real life. It felt more like a doctor's office than an Italian restaurant. It's so pale. Y'all, it's pale. Can we add some coloring, please? Now, I'm not a movie writer, so I don't know if these ideas are actually good, but I'll stand on the fact that there's not enough teens just being teens in this movie. It just has a real serious vibe, which I think was the wrong direction to go in. And a smaller part of the problem is the music. And I'm not talking about the actual songs used, like What's Love, Ballad of a Homeschooled Girl, and Complicated, which is perfectly placed, may I say. I mean the background music. The music you hear in between scenes where it's trying to build up the tension, but it's just kind of like weird. Like it feels very strange. It's a little too sci-fi mystery creepy. It's fair for them to use that tone because that is kind of what the movie is, but I feel like the certain arrangement of it is very bland and brings the tone down. Like there's just no fun to it. Like I can't vibe with the background music, you know what I mean? It's just like whatever. It's meh. Now let's shift gears to the killer. As soon as Quinn came on the screen, I knew he was the killer. I feel like it was meant to be obvious, especially after Summer rejected his no at the beginning of the movie. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that we know who the killer is, but I think I'm just a little confused as to how all the events went down. The big reveal is that an older version of Quinn is the killer. I'm not sure if I have my timelines in order, so I'll explain what I think it is, and if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments. We first have Killer Quinn's timeline where he was dunked in the river. I assume nobody was murdered. He gave Summer the love letter and she actually read it and rejected him. Now this all set him off, so he traveled back in time, aka like the main timeline, where he got dunked in the river. Killer Quinn began and completed the original killings. Then he escaped through the time portal. Later in this timeline, Lucy is born. She accidentally travels back in time, and it's now the movie we're watching where Quinn isn't dunked. Two of the original killings were completed with a bonus Jonas third. Killer Quinn is after Summer, Quinn, and Lucy. I didn't grasp this the first time I watched it. I feel what would have made this all easier to understand is if they showed all of this to us like we're watching a movie. Show me. Could have been as simple as a flashback while Killer Quinn was explaining this to Lucy, Summer, and Good Quinn. And I use the term Good Quinn kind of loosely because I don't understand how they're just okay still hanging around the guy when all it took to set him off was being dunked in a lake and rejected by a lesbian. The dude is a loose cannon and should be locked up. Also, do you know who would have made a great killer for this movie? The science teacher? Think about it. He taught both Lucy and Summer. He had a seemingly close relationship with Lucy. He's randomly in the mall the same time Val and Brian are killed. He's a science teacher, so maybe he's into learning about time travel. It would have made a lot of sense and wouldn't have been as obvious as Quinn. Now let's talk fashion. When the movie was first released, I saw multiple tweets on my timeline complaining that the kids in the 2000s didn't dress like how they were in the movie. Now, I have a controversial take about this. I kind of didn't care that I wasn't time accurate, mainly because I don't think I have a good grasp on what people wore in 2003 because I was 3 years old. Like my earliest 2000s fashion memory I have is Juicy Couture's tracksuits, the style of shirts Alina Gilbert would wear from the Vampire Diaries, apple bottom jeans, boots with the fur, and baby fat. Now objectively, did I think they did a good job? No, I do not. But let's take a closer look at the movie. Does it look like it was a properly funded, well-produced project? No. I do feel that the criticism is valid, but I also feel like it would be low-hanging fruit for me to pick on it when there are other parts of the movie that were way worse. Besides the fashion though, I think that they had the 2003 aesthetic down-packed with Summer's bedroom in the store where Brian and Val got murdered. Now, minor spoiler for Totally Killer, I discussed the ending a little bit. It shouldn't ruin your viewing experience if you haven't seen the movie yet, but if you don't want to know anything, I would just skip this section completely. Time Cut is understandably being compared to another movie, Totally Killer, starring Kiernan Shipka, released last year. Now, this is because they're both time travel slasher movies. I watched Totally Killer when it first came out, so I don't remember much about it, but I do remember having a much better viewing experience. Since the period Totally Killer traveled back to was the 80s, I think they had more material to work with to make the movie more fun. I also think Totally Killer did the thing of the main character not returning to the original time period way better than Time Cut did. I can accept the idea of an alternate future that the main character is living in, rather than the main character living in the past with no actual tangible connection to anyone on the screen. Lucy is kind of just existing with her deciding to stay in the past. I mean, yes, she has her parents and she has her sister, but her parents don't really know that that's their daughter. And yeah, Summer knows that is her sister, but but Lucy was never born yet, you know? Like, it's kind of weird. One thing I feel like I have to mention is that Time Cut was written, shot, and filmed before Totally Killer, despite it being released a year later. The movie was shelved for a while, and it may have had something to do with one of the film's cinematographers, Helena Hutchins, dying on the Rust movie set a few months after filming wrapped on Time Cut. Totally Killer may have copied Time Cut, but did it way better. And I mean way better, in the sense of someone copying your answers on a test, but they somehow got a better score than you did. I'll leave you with this. Time Cut is not a bad movie. I think its premise is interesting, but it failed to be fun and lacked personality, especially when compared to another movie already released with a similar idea. Now, if you find yourself with no more Netflix movies to watch, maybe watch this, but you're really not missing out on much if you decide to skip it.